Right, great. Well, welcome everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute. Got some familiar names showing up. Good to see everyone. This is great. Hey, Mark. Hey, Cheryl. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll just give it another minute or two. Let everybody in. Oh, this is great.
Paul Walker, wow, blast from the past. Former chair of Common Cause,
Great.
Massachusetts, and on the national board.
Great. Hey, Jordan.
Dick Terry. Looks like Bob Zaletti. Wow. Hi, Bob. Paul Walker, I already said. Cheryl, great coalition partner.
So thanks everyone. We'll get going in just a minute. A lot of people still coming in.
Breaking news. Hi, Mom. I see you. I see you. Appreciate your support.
I think my family will be attending too. So, well, great. So it's 4 minutes past. Why don't we get started? So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is A Vision for Voting in Massachusetts. It's a webinar with Common Cause Massachusetts. I bet you know who we are if you're here, but if you don't know, we are a nonpartisan advocacy organization that is dedicated to improving our democracy and holding power accountable. We've been doing that for decades at the national level and here in Massachusetts too. My name is Patrick Roath. I am the chair of the advisory board for Common Cause Massachusetts. With me on the call right now in the webinar is Geoff Foster, our new executive director. And I'll put a pin in that for now because we'll have him introduce himself later. But I think right now I'll introduce the other folks, have the other folks on the call introduce themselves, starting with maybe Pam.
Hey everybody, I think you probably know me, Pam Wilmot. I have been the executive director here in Massachusetts for 22 years, over about the span of 30, and I am now vice president of state operations for the national, but still quite involved here, and Geoff's supervisor. So really looking forward to this conversation and to passing a baton to such a great person and a visionary leader. So Kristina?
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Kristina Mensik. I'm the assistant director at Common Cause Massachusetts. I've been here for a little bit over the past year and a half and have really loved working with Pam and Patrick, and I'm excited to get to work with Geoff as well.
Great. So again, thank you everyone for coming. So we're thrilled to be here tonight to bring this year to a close and open the chapter on the next phase of advocacy here in Massachusetts. It's been a difficult year and right now is frankly a fragile time for our democracy. But it's also been a year of historic voting success, massive turnout in the midst of a pandemic, and our democratic institutions largely holding when we really needed them to. Common Cause has been in that fight every step of the way, both at the national level and everything you hear on the news, but also here in Massachusetts, which we want to talk about a bit more tonight. So we'll talk tonight. We'll talk about our work on the front lines of advocacy this year in Massachusetts. We'll introduce Geoff Foster, our new executive director, which we're very excited to do. And then we're going to look ahead to the critical fights that remain, the things that we want to accomplish next that'll be critical to get done in the coming year in Massachusetts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our outgoing executive director, Pam, who just introduced herself, but I'll also just remind everyone that she was just recently the inaugural recipient of a Lifetime Achievement Award from our friends at the Massachusetts League of Women Voters, and we're very proud of that. So Pam, why don't you take it away?
Oh, great. We're just going to do a very quick review of 2020, which was an extraordinary year, not only for all of us individually, but for Common Cause and for our voting system and legal system. Obviously, COVID-19 has had a huge impact on our lives. And it would have had a much bigger impact on voting. Before we started working on these issues, right before the right as the pandemic hit, there were not a number of primaries. They had incredible problems, huge lines, COVID breakouts, poll workers not showing up. And so we gathered our forces and as part of leading the Election Modernization Coalition, along with the League of Women Voters and Mass Vote and Mass Purg and a number of other organizations, to reform our election laws. It was a huge, huge effort with our champions in the legislature, along with our allies. And as you all know, it succeeded in a record participation as part of mailing every voter an application to vote by mail twice, once in July and once in August. Expanding early voting during weekends requirements, both for the primary and the general primary for the first time, and making a number of changes to make better, easier poll worker participation, to make processing ballots easier. And the result was really an incredible response from the public. Kind of perhaps a little cliche, but if you build it, and we did, the voters definitely came. In the primary, the turnout was 4 times what it had been in 2016. And in both elections, a record number of people voting. In total, and then also even in terms of percentage of overall registered voters, at least for the past 30 years. So in order to do that, we did a lot of work after the legislation passed, and Kristina is going to talk about that.
All right, thank you, Pam. So as Pam said, after the Governor Baker signed the fall elections bill into law in July, the work certainly was not over. We got to work helping with the implementation by working directly with elections officials, trying to help ensure that guidance that elections officials needed came out in time. And in that process, we found that elections officials in Massachusetts expressed a need not just for more poll workers, but for poll workers who were trained and could be vouched for. So together with a number of civic organizations, a group of elections officials, and some researchers, we put together the Massachusetts Student Poll Worker Corps that recruited and trained young people across the state to be poll workers. With the Ash Center, we recruited 200 young people, and a couple of municipalities used our training to train their poll workers. I think that a lot of it felt like 2020 was a pretty overwhelming year, so it feels good to take a moment to celebrate some of those good things. For me, seeing the surge of young people in Massachusetts and really nationwide who not only expressed an interest in, but actually stepped up to serve democracy as poll workers, it was really heartening. I also want to add that in addition to the poll worker training and working on elections, the implementation of the fall elections bill, we did some voter education work. The excellent reforms that we were able to help pass are only as good as people know about them. And so we made a point of doing text banks and phone banks and ads directed at low propensity voting communities. That's only a snippet of the work that we put in this fall, and I will hand it back to Pam to talk about election protection.
So I'm sorry, I mistyped. It's the Q&A function that you can ask questions in, and it is not the chat function. So please, please put your questions in there if you have any. So, so as a response to all of the issues that we were having in not only in Massachusetts, but across the country, Common Cause has led an election protection program along with the Lawyers for Civil Rights across the country. In fact, there are 40 different programs in the United States, and the 1-866 Our Vote hotline as being the centerpiece where anyone can call and get legal legal volunteers to answer the question, guide people to resources, tell them what polling places they're going to. But a signature part of that program is actually putting people volunteers in the field. Many of you attending today have served as election protection volunteers. We had 1,500 people sign up to volunteer this year, which was really astounding. As Kristina said, they did fall into a couple of different buckets this year, in addition to going to the polls and seeing what was transpiring, reporting that back to us in the command center, and informing the hotline, and then election officials to solve problems. There also was a voter education piece, text banking. Our volunteers texted 500,000 voters in Massachusetts, low propensity voters, young voters, gateway cities. And then also a social media disinformation program where we tracked mis and disinformation online, also people with questions as part of their social media platforms, and either answered those directly or had Facebook, Twitter, and other platforms take them down. In terms of Twitter, nationally speaking, half of the posts that were taken down were because of our flags. A really innovative and important program. So on election day, we saw a number of problems. We always do, but I was struck by actually how smoothly all of the voting actually went, given the sea change that happened in how we conduct our elections. There were some instances of ballots being sent to the wrong place. There's some instances of poll workers being confused about in-person voting rules. There are always poll workers who are misinterpreting the law. There were some issues with electioneering, but we were able to solve, and there were some issues with lines. We were able to solve a number of them by working with election officials to adhere to the rules. As part of one of the conversations we had, an election official literally from the city of Lawrence literally drove to the polling place and corrected the problem on the spot. So many thanks to our team, including Kristina and Patrick Horan, who contracted with us to actually work with our volunteers together with our colleagues and our coalition partners. We had about 1,000 people in the field, which is very impressive. Kristina, thanks again.
So the charge of our election protection work and much of our work at Common Cause is really ensuring that those who have the right to vote can actually exercise it. In Massachusetts, for incarcerated citizens who maintain the right to vote while they're serving misdemeanors or held pretrial, which means they're still innocent, that right to vote is not in place in practice. Going into this fall, even with everything else going on around our elections, we very strongly felt that it was time to address this issue in our state and its disproportionate impact on people of color in Massachusetts. We organized a coalition in partnership with the Emancipation Initiative that included many organizations and individuals who have been fighting really hard to protect the right to vote for incarcerated people for years. The problem, in short, is that at the municipal level, where many elections officials until this year, hopefully, don't necessarily know what to do with absentee ballot applications from incarcerated people, so they're often rejected. And then on the state and county levels, there are just no guidelines or regulations in place which hold sheriffs accountable to providing meaningful ballot access for those folks behind the wall. There's a lot more work that needs to be done to protect the political power of our incarcerated citizens in Massachusetts and those Black and POC communities who are over-policed and over-incarcerated. But I do feel proud of some real wins that we did earn this fall. We got the Secretary of Commonwealth to issue some historic guidance that will help ensure fewer absentee ballot applications from incarcerated people are rejected. We worked with the AG's office and the Sheriff's Association, the latter of which provided Know Your Rights signs to superintendents for, to our knowledge, the first time in Massachusetts history. The thing that I'm most proud of coming out of this fall is the coalition that has come together to advance this issue, and the amount of support that I've seen coming from the voting rights community and many others in Massachusetts. So this was only one piece of our work this fall. I think it's fair to say that there was a lot that went into 2020, and I will pass it back to Patrick to lead us into a conversation about what's next.
Great. Well, thank you, Kristina, and thank you, Pam. You know, I think everyone who listened to that summary of what happened this year, it is just an incredible amount of work. And in a normal year, that would have been a lot to do. And of course, what's implicit here is that this is just a year like no other. We think the takeaway from the fall is that all of these reforms that Pam and Kristina just talked about that were hard fought and won need to be made permanent. And there's a lot more that we have to do to make our elections more accessible, which is why we are so thrilled to bring onto our team and into our family Geoff Foster, who will be the incoming executive director to take over from Pam. We are so thrilled to have his leadership to help Common Cause get to that next level and really accomplish what needs to be done. And I think instead of having me kind of go through his bio and tell you all about him, I'd just like to introduce him and turn it over to Geoff and invite him to introduce himself to everyone on the call.
All right, thanks, Patrick. Hey, everyone. This is so exciting for me. I see so many familiar names on the attendee list, folks who work in government, folks who work in the community, folks who are organizers. I see some youth organizers on here too. Shout out to you all who joined tonight. So for folks who don't know me, my name is Geoff Foster, and I am super, super excited to join the Common Cause Massachusetts team. First off, I just really want to give a huge thanks to Pam for her amazing 22 years plus leadership at the helm of Common Cause Mass. Your shoes are impossible to fill, and I look forward to continuing to benefit from your partnership in your new role. Also, thanks to Patrick, the State Advisory Board, Kristina, for all your leadership to date. What an amazing year you all pulled off. I am joining an absolutely formidable team, and I'm so excited. So real quick, I don't know if we can share this. Oh, awesome, Kristina. Thank you so much. So I come to this work after 11 amazing years as an organizer, partnering with young people on policy campaigns, ranging from civic education and emerging adult justice to a notable local effort attempting to lower the voting age to 17 in our municipal elections in my home city of Lowell. Shout out to Etta, who's on this call right now, who for many years was our local election official and who was a great ally to our young people. Throughout all that time, I learned a ton about ways that our democracy seems to serve and benefit some groups and people more than others. And the policy work that we took on sought to directly address that imbalance. We tried to remove barriers to civic engagement and voting for our next generation. I'm really proud of all that work that I got to do alongside such amazing young people. So I come into this position also with a newer identity, and that's the role of a husband and father. I have an amazing wife, Sarah, who is a public school teacher, and together we have a 2-year-old daughter, Madeline, and a 7-month-old son, Oliver, who you may occasionally hear screaming in the background. Being a dad has added a totally new and powerful perspective to this work for me to make sure that our democracy is more inclusive, accessible, and equitable for those that we on this call all plan to hand the work to in the future. This past year has taught us all so much. It's taught us that many public systems were designed to be exclusive. It's taught us that there remains major systemic and intersectional forms of oppression that not only hurt low-income and communities of color, but that maintain a status quo that benefits a few of us at the expense of the rest of us. And so I come into this position with a fierce focus that the work we seek to do at Common Cause Massachusetts must put the needs of these communities who are most unheard and most underrepresented at the very center of our work. You know, I think we all know this because we're passionate about Common Cause's mission, but we know that democracy is a form of government that relies on the whole, not just a small, powerful, and loud few. You know, this past election nationally was another strong reminder that our current election system is in need of improvements to better meet voters where they're at and to ensure that our government is inviting more folks into the democratic process. You know, it's with this understanding that I'm so excited to share about the road ahead for our work. So this coming session will continue to partner in strong allegiance with the Election Modernization Coalition, which includes a lot of folks who are on this call. So shout out to you all, but it includes ACLU, Mass Vote, Mass Purg, the League of Women Voters, who I must add just gave Pam a very deserving Lifetime Achievement Award for all of her work at Common Cause Mass. So again, congrats, Pam. It includes the Mass Voter Table, Lawyers for Civil Rights, and more. Even in my 1.5 weeks on the job, we've already had multiple groups reaching out to see if there's ways they can get involved in the work. So I'm so excited. Common Cause Mass is going to continue to keep a very stern eye on government transparency and ethics, while leaning hard into policy efforts to ensure more equitable and accessible voting. You can see here, our long list of past priorities will continue in the future. Some notable things are going to be us focusing on updating automatic voter registration and implementing risk-limiting post-election audits, and many more issues that I know are near and dear to many of your hearts and ours at Common Cause Mass as well. First and foremost, we've already begun, as was mentioned, a campaign to push for mail-in voting to be made permanent. The legislature, some may know, just extended in the budget the temporary program into March in advance of the local elections, but we must push for this to be made permanent. Some of you may have seen just yesterday, the Boston Globe editorialized their support to not cancel such a successful program, which led to a dramatic increase in voter turnout, especially, as Pam said, in the state primary election. We're moving in the right direction with this one. We're also going to be continuing our push to pass same-day voter registration this session. Not only does this make sense from an access angle, but also from an administrative angle. Massachusetts is long overdue for this, and we're really going to try to get that done this session. As Kristina mentioned, we're also going to be adding a new priority to push for the codification of a plan for sheriffs and the DOC to ensure that all people have access to voting while incarcerated. Over half of incarcerated people are held pre-trial and are still considered entirely innocent in the eyes of the court. And the process to vote is confusing, time-consuming, and disproportionately removes political power from communities of color who are over-policed in Massachusetts, as Kristina said. So this issue, as many folks who know me in my past role, is near and dear to my heart as well, and I'm really excited to bring these two worlds together in this role, while building on the amazing work already being done by populations currently incarcerated who are fighting for their franchise as well. One big item that's on our radar for 2021 is redistricting. That's right, it's that time of the decade for us at Common Cause to join our partners, most notably the Drawing Democracy Coalition, the Mass Voter Table, to ensure that this process is done maximizing and centering the voices of our communities of color. So in addition to our policy focus, I'm also personally committed to the internal work around racial equity and shared power in my new role. That's why I'm committed in my first year to prioritizing working closely with Pam and leadership to bring new perspectives and lived experiences to our state advisory board to be more representative of the whole Commonwealth. It's so important that our organization leans into this work so that we're dismantling oppression on all levels. Team, I am so hopeful for the future of voting in Massachusetts. Imagine elections that are bound less by clocks and administrative deadlines, but by a shared commitment to the whole, to all voices, especially those who are kept out of the democratic process by means beyond their control. These are real people that I know and love. You know, imagine a young single mother who works 2 jobs to pay for her family's needs, yet who cannot find the time during the first Tuesday in November to get to their polling location. They deserve the option of filling out a mail-in ballot after putting their kids to bed on their time. Or the new first-time voter. Every year, my old role, I get to meet these amazingly passionate new first-time voters. You know, consider that first-time voter who's so excited about engaging in the democratic process, but who can't get a ride to the polls unless it's maybe on a Friday. And they don't have stable housing, so maybe they're not able to receive mail. You know, they should be able to vote early on their time. And this is our work ahead, not just to make our elections more accessible through further administrative changes. That's critical, but to do so deliberately, to meet real people where they're at. That's where our democracy lives, in the hearts and hands of real people, like us on this call, and those who have not yet been invited into the process, all of them. So I want to close with an ask. Please keep your passion for protecting our democracy front and center as we transition from a national conversation in 2020 to an extremely local one in 2021. It's easy to feel outraged by the goings on in DC. I get it. I'm there too. But let's keep the fire burning for the work at the State House and our town and city halls. The Common Cause Massachusetts team is just Pam, Kristina, our amazing board, myself. So we really need all of you in this effort if we're going to succeed. And I cannot wait to be part of this movement with you all. I'm ready to get to work. Hey, thanks so much. Please feel free to reach out to me separate. I would love to have one-on-ones with all of you and learn from all of you in this new role. But for the sake of time, thanks again, and going to pass it back to Patrick.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Geoff. These online events are great, but you can't hear the applause, which is coming in really strong right now, I'm sure. So thank Geoff. It was great to hear your vision for what's ahead of us and all of the hard and important work that we have to do. There's been some great questions bubbling up. I really would love to encourage everybody, if you have a question for Geoff or for Pam, Kristina, for any of us about the organization generally, just please use that Q&A feature down at the bottom and drop your question in. I'll give everybody a chance to kind of formulate a question or two before we get to them. I think just for now, I'll say, we need you, as Geoff said, we need everybody here to be part of our mission and to help us. And we've got at least 2 really direct ways that you can be a part of what we're trying to accomplish here. Maybe you knew Geoff before this, but you're new to Common Cause, or maybe you've been with us forever and you want to just make sure you're still in the game, and that's great. The first thing to do is to volunteer your time and your energy and lend your support to our Action Network. This is how we get people involved at the grassroots, in your community, bringing your neighbors and your friends and your family in at the very local level to really accomplish important change. And that's we'll drop the URL in the link, but that's also commoncause.org/join us. And the second way that you can be a part of our mission and to help us out in accomplishing these goals is to make a financial contribution. And this is really critical. This brand of grassroots policy advocacy that we have, the way that we get things done is time consuming, it's hard, and it requires resources. And we rely on the support of generous donors to make that all happen, to make those resources add up so they can create the excellent work that Pam and Geoff and Kristina do. So I'd ask everyone to please consider contributing. You can do it right now. You can grab the URL, give MA, you can go to, Kristina just dropped it in the chat. Really, really easy and quick to support us financially, or please just consider us in your end of year giving. That's a great time at the end of the year when you're figuring out which charitable organizations to support. Just please keep Common Cause Massachusetts in mind. The money goes directly to these really important policy objectives, and there is a direct through line between your contribution and getting some pretty cool stuff done in our Commonwealth. So, so with that, that's my pitch. That's my ask. We'd love everybody to get involved. I think we've got some time. We've got plenty of time for questions. I hope that we are able to air some really cool questions and surface some of and make this more of a conversation. Really, is what I love. So there's some that have come up. I'll kind of distill a few of them for our first one to Geoff. Geoff, I'd love it if you talk, we had that great picture up with you and the young people in Lowell. And you touched on this a bit in your remarks, but I'd love to hear you just speak a little bit more about how your previous experiences as a community organizer and someone who's on the ground, really in grassroots, working with young people, are going to, how you think of that as translating into this new role, which is like a little different, but has some similarities too. How do you go about thinking about that?
Yeah, so thanks, Patrick, appreciate that. And again, just looking through the list of attendees, and what an awesome group of people who I've been able to work with and organize with for years. And so I would just say, I think what was really powerful for me in my previous role was the strength and expertise of our organizers, people with lived real life experience who are, we'd often say, who are, uniquely positioned to speak truth to power, but also who can speak about solid ideas for solutions to problems that they and their families have experienced for generations. Issues that when we led our candidate forums, where young people would lead those, issues that young people were passionate about putting in front of a candidate were issues that, didn't always end up getting talked about by media or in this kind of smaller circles of more reliable, high propensity voters. So to see the collision of young people who, you can point to and say have been unfortunately and strategically excluded from political processes and power really run into the arena with an expertise that I saw firsthand just would bowl over lawmakers and build the strongest allies out of maybe, some might consider unlikely folks. And so, the idea of connecting the expertise of our communities to the goings on in the State House, that's a bridge that was something I was often able to help facilitate in my previous role that I'm very excited to bring into this role. There is power and passion in communities who don't have much political power right now. And so to the extent that this new role will allow additional access for me personally, to leverage our internal relationships with lawmakers and policymakers, I am going to totally make a priority to make sure that I have an ear and constant communication with organizers and as I say, real folks out across the Commonwealth in communities that might not be a part of the current Common Cause Massachusetts network. So really excited to help continue in terms of bridging that gap between what I would say the streets and the State House, because I think it's long overdue for arenas of power and decision making to start addressing the needs of everyone in the Commonwealth and not just folks who have the kind of privileged access and understanding of how to navigate the State House currently.
Yep, that's great. Thank you, Geoff. And I love how it ties into Common Cause's DNA, right? Like that is what we've always been about. And I think that really embodies what the organization does. A great question here from Richard. I'll just read it verbatim. And this can be, Pam or Geoff or whoever wants to jump on this one. How did the census go? Will we have as good a redistricting process here as we had 10 years ago? So relies on a little bit of history you might want to provide. Maybe that's one for Pam.
Sure. Well, the census is still an open question. We actually at Common Cause have a lawsuit against the Commerce Department to make sure that the data is used properly and that they extend the deadline. There is everyone knows there's a huge question. The Trump administration has been trying to manipulate the count to exclude certain people. And I think there's a lot there. We could spend a lot of time talking about it. This was the first census that was online. There was a big coalition that worked very hard to try and ensure that everyone is counted, but it is very difficult both in the environment of COVID, but especially in the situation where you have an administration that was trying to exclude people and to make citizenship a requirement for the census. It created an environment where I think it's very difficult to count people and count them accurately and for people to feel comfortable answering the census. As far as redistricting, there is a big coalition that is working on it. The Drawing Democracy Coalition is something that Kristina has been working hard on. We all have been working hard on Mass Voter Table, Access Strategies Fund, and other funders. But some of the ways, there's also a question about how can volunteers be involved. So there will be a bunch of hearings. We're working to create a transparent process so that people can be involved. And 10 years ago, we were able to pressure the legislature, partially through a campaign that we did a number of years before that, to create an independent redistricting commission instead of the legislature drawing the districts. It's too late to do that at this point for the 2021 census. But what it does, and I think that still is hanging out there a little bit, it created in the last redistricting cycle, and I think still now, to pressure for them to do it right. And in the last cycle, they tripled the number of majority minority districts, and created a lot of opportunities for new voices to enter politics. We're going to have to keep the pressure on for that. There will be a map making tools available for people. We might do a contest like we did last time. We have not determined that yet, to help encourage people to actually get involved at that level. There will be a number of opportunities. There will be an order for redistricting that will come up sometime early, which will ask you to weigh in with your elected officials. So lots of things there. Kristina, do you have anything to add on to that?
I think the only thing to add is that there will be opportunities to engage on public education, both weighing in on redistricting principles and maps with your legislators. But I do, I think it's important to, as much as we can collectively, make redistricting part of what we talk about when we talk about democracy. So as we're kind of pivoting these end of 2020 election conversations onto what's next. We know that there are municipal elections coming up in Massachusetts, and there's this also process around the corner that is critically important. So I know our kind of call and our coalition's call has been to say, or underscore, that the wheels of democracy keep on turning, and that the redistricting process is just as an important process for the public to pay attention to as all of those other democracy issues and the elections that we were also invested in this fall.
Yep, great. Well, thank you both. A couple questions coming up in the Q&A around the ranked choice voting proposal that was on the ballot this year and did not ultimately pass. We certainly, I know Common Cause was very supportive of the initiative. We were behind it 100%. Unfortunately, it did not ultimately pass. Maybe we can talk about, just to set a little bit of the scene around that, and maybe a bit of where do we go from there? What are the other fights, or is there another way to get ranked choice done?
So I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll take that, since I was involved with it, and actually drafted the first RCV legislation back in 2004 for the state. There was also another bill that involved federal races, but this is an ongoing project, and we were deeply disappointed in the results. I think it was a very difficult year, given COVID and all the changes that made it very difficult for those one-on-one conversations about a subject. We found early in the polling that if people heard about ranked choice voting from us or from trusted sources, they were likely to support it and would support it. But if they didn't hear from us first, it was very hard to get over that hurdle. So there just needs to be more education. And it was a tough year to be running this initiative. The folks at Voter Choice Massachusetts, on which I was on the advisory board, did a great job. We worked hard, did hundreds of thousands of text messages and voter information. I think we're going to have to continue to do education. There will be legislation filed. We will support that legislation, but it will, I think, take a while to overcome this loss, unfortunately.
Thanks, Pam. how about we get Geoff back involved? I've seen a few questions come up with the hashtag Foster, which should definitely be a thing. I strongly encourage everyone to pick that one up. That's great. I'd love to share, there's an early question from Terry, which is really about, I take it as a question about bringing in the whole state and how to achieve equity at the state level and how to also think about this in a grassroots perspective. And I'll let you tackle that one, Geoff.
Yeah, first, just want to say shout out Manny. I see you. Hashtag Manny. Appreciate you, my friend. Terry, also, thank you for the question. And Terry, thank you for your partnership for years. You have been such a helpful partner to our young people during the civics education campaign. So I appreciate you being here tonight and your just thought partnership. It's great. In my previous role, we spent a long time trying to connect. So I'm a youth worker in my previous role, in addition to an organizer. And we spent a lot of time making sure that we had a strong statewide representation of young people. And so the coalition that I had the joy to help co-keep for years was really focused on gateway cities and urban centers across the state. And we knew when you're working in the State House, it was just as important to have representation from Springfield, Pittsfield, and Holyoke as it was to have representation from Winthrop or Ashland. And so, Terry, I appreciate the question. I'm going to be really intentional with my organizing strategy and our team strategy here as we're heading into the new legislative session to make sure our coalition is representative of the entire Commonwealth geographically. As folks who are plugged in probably know, there's a growing and stronger voice in Western Massachusetts in general saying, hey, we need to have stronger representation in terms of the issues out west. And so I think that that's going to be really critical to our work. We had great success forming a statewide network of youth programs to do advocacy in the State House. We also were able to form, and shout out to Manny. Manny was very helpful in this work, but we formed a statewide street outreach worker network. Actually went outside of Massachusetts. It was a New England-wide thing. But we were able to really bring together voices from all across the Commonwealth. And, it yielded us amazing champions in the legislature from Holyoke, like former state rep Aaron Vega, who just championed the issues we were pushing, and current state senator Adam Hines, who himself was a former youth worker and helped start up a youth violence prevention program out in Pittsfield. So, I think that's going to be really strategic for us. I don't mind driving to Western Massachusetts or doing Zoom calls to Western Massachusetts. But I think, Terry, your point's well taken. The coalition needs to represent the whole Commonwealth, and I'm excited to bring my network into the work.
Great. Well, thank you, Geoff. So, I've got two different ideas for where to go, but let's start with just bringing it back to our priorities for the next session and what the real grounded things we want to accomplish in the next legislative session and working with our partners on Beacon Hill. If there's one priority, is it to make everything permanent? Is to get election day registration done, or is it something else? Is it redistricting? How do you think about that, Geoff, or Pam? But really, Geoff.
Yeah, I think that first off, just shout out to our partners with Drawing Democracy, the coalition, and the Drawing Democracy Fund that's been really helping to get things going. I know there are some folks on the call now who are very active in that. So just want to honor you and say that I'm excited to come in and follow your lead and partner and help where I can. I think that we're going to be seeing a stronger than ever push to make sure that as the legislature takes this process up, that really they're intentional about including the voices of all communities. Some communities that identify in Massachusetts that go beyond lines, that go outside of cities. I've organized and had the honor to do so with a core constituency of young people that maybe once lived in Lowell, but then moved to Lawrence, or maybe once lived in Lawrence and moved to Haverhill. And so I think it's really, really important that, the work, which has already started, that we're really engaging communities, however and wherever they are, that they have some sort of powerful influence over the legislative process. And, I'm excited to be a helpful gatekeeper in helping to make sure that we're connecting the work that goes on in the State House to the community and vice versa. I'm excited to help play that role. But again, the coalition put on a splendid webinar last week that had Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley join and just speak with conviction to the reality that her election was a direct result of the amazing organizing work that happened 10 years ago during the redistricting in their particular congressional district. So deeply inspired by the idea that we could do more of that, deeply inspired by the idea that there are communities who are ready to step into their power. And I know this, representation matters, right? And I think it's one thing to say that, we're being more intentional around diversity, equity, and inclusion in terms of the internal working of our nonprofits. But I also think the time is now to put our money where our mouth is around redistricting, to make sure that we're starting to look across the entire Commonwealth at districts that can better advance diverse representation for the communities who need that political power. So excited to play a role in that space.
Great. Thanks, Geoff. I feel like we would really be remiss if we talked about all these democracy and voting issues today, and we did not acknowledge the fact that the members of the Electoral College today, all across the country in different states, voted and cast their votes. It happened today in Massachusetts at State House. It was live streamed and it was socially distanced. And they didn't have the celebratory meal that they usually do afterwards. I think there's a broad conception that this can't be the way that we select our presidents in the future, or if it is, there has to be a way to make this a little bit more smoother and update it to be more modern. One of the Common Cause national priorities, I know for a long time, has been reform of the Electoral College. Pam, I wonder if you would speak to that. I know it's been a project you've been deeply involved in over the years.
Yeah, very thrilled to have led the National Popular Vote campaign here in Massachusetts. We joined an interstate compact in 2010, which currently has 15 states and the District of Columbia on board, to change the way we elect the president to have a national popular vote. That would ensure that the candidate with the most votes from real people actually wins, and would also mean that every vote in every election is equal and equally relevant. So we all know that the election boils down to a few battleground states, and those are an accident of demographics. They shift over time. Georgia has never been one for many, many years, and certainly was this time around. And it artificially creates all sorts of crises because of those, chunking the voters down into smaller blocks, as opposed to the national scene where Joe Biden was ahead by 7 million votes. So the National Popular Vote Compact only goes into effect when we have enough states that represent the majority of the Electoral College. That's 74 more electoral votes, depends on the states that we have left, but maybe another 5, 10, depending on the size. And we're working hard to get that through. I'm glad that Massachusetts was, I think, the 6th state, and good to lead the way there. We're going to have to lead the way on some other things, including making sure that our elections are as best that they can possibly be. And I'm thrilled to be working with Geoff and Kristina and Patrick to ensure that that happens.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Pam. So those have been excellent questions. I want to make sure we're respectful of people's time. I also want to make sure we give Geoff a chance to close us out this evening. Thank you so much to everybody for coming. If there are more questions, we're here. We shoot us an email, call us, text us, find us on social media. We're around. We want to engage with you guys, everyone who's participated this evening, as much as possible. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll let Geoff close us out, please.
So again, thank you to all of you who tuned in tonight. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Kristina. Thank you, Patrick. I know many of our advisory board members are on this. Just want to say thank you so much for welcoming me to the team, but also all of you who've been such reliable and strong members of the Common Cause Massachusetts network. and some of you who are tuning in the first time tonight because you're part of my personal network. Just want to say thank you. I think over the course of the history of this country, it's been clear that we can measure progress in the way we've expanded the franchise. I became passionate about this issue working with young people who were literally fighting for their right to vote in local elections in Lowell. And I just became so enamored with the issue. I love the youth work. I love all the amazing progress I made in my previous role, but I am so excited to jump into this work with you all. I am committed to being a constant learner. I invite your feedback. I'm going to put right now in the chat my email, and I would love to hear from you all. I would love for you to reach out, give me your thoughts, give me your feedback. I joke in my previous role, I say, I want to be a sponge and constantly learn and grow. But I do appreciate you all putting your trust in me in this position. And I am convinced that together we can create a movement by real people for real people that can bring about some major changes and expand access to voting and democracy for the entire Commonwealth. I'm really excited to get to work. And I hope you all have an amazing holiday coming up, whatever you celebrate or don't, and know that we are so appreciative of your membership, and we will be reaching out over the break and right away in January as we jump right into a new legislative session. So with that, thank you again. Appreciate all the support and can't wait to get to work. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Happy
Thanks, everyone.
holidays.
Thank you.